Hey guys, welcome back to Justin Reads Romance. I'm Justin and I'm here with the weekly wrap up. It is 2 weeks worth of books, but it's not as many as usual. I haven't had as much time as I thought that I was going to with the externship. I had 1 day out of 5 days that I've worked so far where I had an opportunity to read while at work. And then when I get home, I just fall straight asleep. So anyway, I just don't have that many books to talk about. So I think that it's okay to do a bi-weekly wrap up and I won't get into trouble with too much talking. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. So I do have 2 books that I didn't review at the end of May. I read them on the 30th and the 31st and they didn't make it to my week 4 of May wrap up. The first one is Tattered by Devney Perry. I actually read this book in 2018 and I remembered very little of it, and when Devney Perry announced that she was having that Kickstarter for the special edition covers of this Lark Cove series, I was like, I think that I should read it and see if it's worth it. Maybe I'll buy one of those books because they're quite expensive. And I wanted to reread Tattered. All of the Lark Cove series is on Anyplay, so I listened to that towards the end of May, and I literally remembered nothing of this book. Like, it felt like reading it for the first time all over again. She writes small town romances, and that's exactly what this is. It's a second chance romance after a one-night stand between Thea and Logan. She used to live in New York City, and after that one-night stand, she didn't know Logan's last name, had no way to contact him. She winds up pregnant, and she grew up an orphan. She was taken in by a lady who used to cook at the orphanage, and they moved to the small town in Montana named Lark Cove. And like 6 years later, by absolute chance, Logan and Thea run into each other again when Logan's actually looking to invest in the local camp for kids in Lark Cove. And then he finds out that he has a daughter named Charlie, and Charlie is this beautiful little tomboy. She finally gets to meet her dad, and she doesn't do well with change, so she's meeting him for the first time, and he brings up, oh, well, maybe, you know, you and your mom can come to New York and stuff, and she does not want to leave Lark Cove, and neither does Thea. Like, she definitely has an attraction right away again with Logan. The sparks are flying just like they did that night when they first met. But she has so many bad memories in New York that that's just definitely off the table. But Logan keeps thinking that he can convince them to live in New York. And I guess that's the biggest conflict of this book, is Logan thinks since his life is in New York, his family is very wealthy, they're part of this foundation, and he's a high-powered attorney, and he's like, my job is in New York. It's impossible for me to just move here on a permanent basis. Like, he's planning to buy a house so he can visit and stuff, but he wants them to move like long-term with him to New York. There's 2 things really keeping Logan from seeing the bigger picture. One is that Thea does not want to open up about her past and the reasons why she's so against going to New York. And also, just Logan is not paying attention to the cues, like, at all. She has said Charlie doesn't deal well with change. He's witnessed himself what a tomboy that Charlie is. And still, he does some things towards the end, like it's approaching the 3rd act conflict, that I'm like, wow, it just seems like he hasn't been paying attention. So Logan definitely by no means is my favorite hero that Devney Perry's written. I feel like he's a little bit too out of touch with Charlie and Thea. Like, he should be picking up on some of these cues that they're giving him, and he's just almost ignoring it. I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think that it was just hard to be on his side. I'm just like, it's blatantly obvious that they're uncomfortable and you think everything's fine. And then Thea did not want to open up to him. She has trust issues and it takes her a very long time to do so. So this book was enjoyable, definitely has classic Devney Perry feel to it. I gave this book 4 stars, and I immediately picked up the second one, Timid, which I had never read before, so this was the first time for me. And Timid follows the story of Jackson, who is Thea's best friend. They both work at the local bar and they're partners together. Jackson's a bit of a man whore. He also is an orphan living in New York. They grew up together. And Jackson's heroine is Willa. There's a little bit of an age gap between them. Willa has always had a crush, giant crush, since Jackson first moved to Lark Cove. He still thinks of her like a kid, even though she's in her 20s. He still thinks of her as this little kid that he first met. He can't even say her name right. I think he calls her Willow, and her name's Willa. And one night, it actually happens at the end of Tattered, he sees Thea drawing this beautiful girl, and he's like, oh my god, who's this girl? Is this girl in the bar right now? Does she leave? And she's just like, what are you talking about? This is Willa. And he's like, no way, that's not Willa. That girl that you drew right there, that's not Willa. And his eyes kind of get opened. There was an interesting interaction between Willa and Jackson that happens that he does not remember. And I think that she was absolutely right to put him off after that interaction. He definitely has to grovel from then on, but I can't say that I enjoyed their romance. I had a really difficult time with Willa's obsession with Jackson, like the way that she felt like she was in love and meant to be with Jackson, but they barely had any interactions. He never truly saw her, called her the wrong name. Like, it was just very hard to get on board with that kind of like, it felt like puppy love, but we're gonna call it real love then. Anyway, I just had a hard time. Again, Jackson was another character like Thea who had a difficult time talking about his past, and I just didn't really enjoy it that much. So I gave it 3 stars. It was pretty forgettable, I have to say. Now, I did reread the rest of the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews. I've been working my way up to it, so I'm very briefly going to run through the last 3. So I read Magic Shifts, which is book 8, on the tail end of May as well. I love this book so much. The storyline with this Jen, which is a genie, and the way that Ilona Andrews incorporates like mythology, like true mythology, into this book, and the big bad having a little bit of a tie-in with Kate. Like, this is the first time that Kate actually is up against this opponent that she really has no idea, like, well, how do I defeat this opponent, because my magic does not work against this Jen. Very cool revelations about her powers and the limits of her powers. And also, I really love this book because this is the book where Kate and Curran, since they're no longer Beast Lord and Beast Lady of the Pack of Atlanta, they get kind of like a shit deal. Curran owns too much stock in all the pack's businesses, and instead he gets offered all of the stakes that they have bought into the Mercenary Guild. And the Mercenary Guild has been falling apart for the past couple of years, but this is like a new project for Curran, and I really love the way that Kate and Curran approach this. It's like, I love it. I just love it so much. It just gives me so much life. There's also a really cool thing that happens in this book, and I'm going to put a little spoiler tag right here. In this book, Kate goes back to Mishmar, and she brings the bones of Era, and Era is her aunt that she faces off against in book 4. She brings the bones and the blood of Era and lays it at the tomb of her grandmother in Mishmar. She weeps over the bones, and she basically resurrects Era, and Era puts her essence into this knife so that Kate can take Era with her, and she is going to guide Kate in a lot of the ways of like their family's magic that Kate has no idea how to tap into, what the limits are. Like I said, she had limits. She has Djinn blood in her, and so she can't use her power words against the Djinn. And it's just really cool because someone who was once a villain, her Aunt Era, who tried to kill her, is now on Kate's side, and I love that so much. And I loved the visions that the oracles were sending her about her future son and stuff, and I loved all of that shit, and it was just amazing. So of course I give this book 5 stars. The next one is Magic Binds, and in this book Kate and Curran are trying to get married. Like, he's just like, okay, it's time to make it official, and the witch oracles keep having these visions, and every time they have a vision, they know that there's like an anchor. There's something that Kate has to do in order to circumvent the visions that they've been having of Roland killing Kate and Curran's future son. And I just realized, spoiler, I just realized that the resurrection of Era happens in this book, not Magic Shifts. Yeah, I think I messed that one up. Anyway, love that part of this book. I thoroughly enjoy every adventure that Kate goes on, and this one was a bunch of like mini little adventures. Like, we need to advance to this level and make sure that we defeat like this small obstacle, and Roland's behind all of the obstacles. And I just love, like, throughout it all, Roland is still trying to be like this doting father type of thing. I just love their confrontations. The father-daughter relationship between Roland and Kate is the highlight of this series. It's so complicated, so complex, and it's wonderful and it's beautiful. And the addition of Era being a factor in their familial relationship is awesome as well, and I just really love it. And Julie, like, her role in that, it was just perfection. I cannot describe how much I love this series. And of course, in Magic Triumphs, the cumulative book of this series is fantastic, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that this is the strongest ending to a series because I think that there's so much built upon the series. There's so many expectations with how the final confrontation is going to go down between Kate and the big bad of the series. And you have complex feelings about how you want it to go down because of the complex relationship between Kate and the big bad. So Ilona Andrews did honestly the only thing that feels satisfying. The way that they wrapped it up is so satisfying. And the way that it ends, at the time when it ended, I was like, oh my gosh, they are setting up the potential for this spinoff series. And of course they did do a spinoff series, with Blood Heir being the first one of the spinoff series. And it is there's still so many questions after Blood Heir. So good. But it's definitely, this person, Julie, her series. It's definitely her series. Kate and Kern really weren't featured in it. So anyway, I loved Magic Triumphs. It is wonderful. It gives me all the feels every single time. And I love the return of a certain character that I'm not going to talk about. But, if you've read Iron and Magic, you know which I'm talking about. And it was just fantastic. It's fantastic. So the next book I tried to read was False Boys by Penelope Douglas. And I wasn't sure if I was going to officially DNF this book at the time that I put it down. So I picked this up during work. I had a little bit of downtime. I started reading it. I got like 35% into the book. And I felt like I read, like nothing happened. Like there was action, of course. The heroine, Aro, is like a bad girl. She's poor, she's from the wrong side of the tracks. And then Hawken Trent, who is Jackson and Juliet's son, he is the rich boy and he's a good boy and all that jazz. So it's like, wrong side of the tracks type of romance between those two. But like the way that they meet, it felt so like complicated. Like I didn't really understand what Penelope Douglas was trying to do with their story. Like it felt like it was more complicated than it needed to be. The people that Aro was involved with in the beginning, and then there was a 13-year-old girl, Tommy, and I was just like, what is your purpose here? Like it just felt messy. The beginning of this book felt so messy, and I was a little bit disappointed because when I said that I was going to read Penelope Douglas's new book, people said like it was like their original series. Yes, it was more like the Fallaway series, which they wrote way back when. And I haven't liked any of their new books that they've been putting out. It's just they haven't done it for me. So I was hoping that it was going to have more of the vibe of Bully, but it didn't for me. Like I just reread those books not too long ago, and I don't feel like Falls Boys has the same vibe. I don't know how to explain it because I feel like the Fallaway series has more of a small town vibe, even though these are high school kids doing stuff that like the parents are rarely around. I feel like it was explained a lot more. Why is Tate's dad never around? Well, he works overseas and she is old enough to stay at her house. Her grandmother lives like an hour away. Like it's iffy, but it makes sense why she's allowed to stay at home alone and she keeps in touch with her dad all the time. And then Jared's mom is just a little neglectful, but I feel like everything that happened, like it made sense that they were able to do what they were doing. But in Falls Boys, the way that these characters are portrayed, it feels more like Devil's Night. The Devil's Night series, it's like, how are these people, these children capable and have like the power, the influence and stuff that they supposedly had? And I just don't believe the power and influence and the capability of like Hawk. I just don't believe it. And like Arrow, like, I don't know. I just don't believe it. It's very unbelievable to me to read about these characters being the age that they are in a small town that they are living in. It's just very hard. I was very uninterested. I did not care. I did not see the sparks flying between these two. I was so uninterested. And at first I was just like, I don't know, maybe it's the mood that I'm in. Maybe I need to be in a better mood to enjoy this book, because I was really looking forward to it after Penelope Douglas announced that they were going to do a next gen series. It's been in the works for a while, but like once it was announced that this was the year that we were finally going to get the first book, I was extremely excited. That's why I reread them, but it's just not working. And I don't know if I'm going to pick up another book by Penelope Douglas at this point. Like I've just been so disappointed too many times, and I don't know what's going on, because I still enjoyed their books that I've always loved. Like rereading them, I still enjoy them, but the new ones are just not cutting it for me. They just don't. So yeah, I'm just officially DNFing Falls Boys. Next, I read June 1st by Jennifer Hartman. This was on my June TBR. I was very curious to read more by Jennifer Hartman after reading Still Beating. It has an extremely different vibe to it, but I could still see those hallmarks by Jennifer Hartman after reading June 1st. Like at the end of it, I had noticed, I picked up on a couple of things that it feels like a signature for Jennifer Hartman. But this book, guys, this book starts off with such a tragedy. Like my heart was beating out of my chest. This is the book that I decided, once I put down Falls Boys, I was like, I need something that's not like this. And I picked up June 1st. I'm at work reading this. And Brant is 6 years old at the time. He was just playing outside with his best friend. Theo's mom is pregnant and she's just about to have a baby. They leave to go to the hospital. And Theo was just kind of like, oh, well, you know, you always wanted a sister. She can be your sister too. We'll be like Mario and Luigi and we'll protect her. She'll be Princess Peach and stuff. And they're just like cute little 6-year-olds talking about like a new baby and how much they want to protect this little girl. But we get hints through a 6-year-old's eyes that his father is overbearing and possibly abusive to the mother. And we get confirmation with that when Brant, as a 6-year-old, is woken up that very same night by his father. And his father is panicking and telling him to get underneath his bed. And he needs to close his eyes, close his ears, don't come downstairs, wait for a while, and then call 911. This scene is so harrowing and so hard to read, but I felt like I needed to be there with that 6-year-old little boy as he's experiencing that, because I as an adult knew it was going to happen, and he as a 6-year-old was so confused about what was happening, and my heart was breaking for him already. And he does end up by going downstairs and he sees that his father has murdered his mother and then also committed suicide. So very heavy stuff going on in the beginning of this book, and I was not expecting this book to be all sunshine and roses because of Jennifer Hartman, you know? And what happens is that in Brant's mother's will, she actually stipulated that she wanted Theo's mom and dad to take care of her son Brant because she had witnessed what a loving relationship that they had and how great of a father Theo's dad was, and she wanted that for her son. So it's so heartbreaking when Brant goes to live with his best friend. He thinks he's just staying there just for a little while and he's going to eventually get to go home. He's a little bit withdrawn, a little bit depressed, doesn't understand completely. And he doesn't know if he likes this new baby that he witnesses, because it's she was born on the day that his parents died. And he thinks that by wishing that he could also have a baby sister, this was the trade-off for him losing his parents. And now all of a sudden he's living over here and has this baby named June. He kind of resents her at first, but then he grows quickly attached to her. It is the cutest, most heartwarming thing. This book, this contemporary book, has such a soulmate, fated mate quality to it between Brant and June. Now, it is a taboo relationship because Theo's parents do adopt Brant and he grows up with June. She is a baby, he is a 6-year-old, and they grow up together, and she views him as a brother. And it's the romance between June and Brant. And let me tell you, it is a rough ride. It takes you on a journey from the time when Brant first starts living with them throughout the years. There's a couple of time jumps that you really get to see them growing up together as kids, and she's hammering home the tabooness of this relationship. I will say I thought that the first half of the book was a lot stronger, witnessing the type of love that Brant has for June and comparing it to the way that Theo loves June. You can already tell a difference. It's very innocent, but you can already see a difference, and I love seeing that. Of course, it gets more complicated once they're adults, and some of the things that happened toward the end, it wasn't terrible. I would have preferred if it went a different way. There's more tragedy to come, more heartbreak, more crying, but I really did love this book a lot. So I gave this book 4.5 stars. It's almost a 5-star. It was just that second half of the book just wasn't quite as compelling. The characters were frustrating a little bit, but I really loved them. I love June 1st. I like it more than Still Beating. So I don't know, maybe this should be a 5-star, because I gave Still Beating 4.5 stars. Maybe this book should be a 5-star. I don't know. Then I reread another book, and you might be like, Jessin, why are you rereading so much? I feel kind of bad because I do always love to read, but when I know that I'm going to have my long 12-hour shifts 3 days in a row, I don't want to start a new book, because then that means that I'm going to stay up a lot later wanting to read this new book. So my compromise is like, oh, well, I like to read to fall asleep. Let's just reread a favorite that I haven't read in a long time. And that's why I reread so much. I like to reread books as I'm falling asleep instead of starting a new one, because then I'll stay up much later than I intended to. I picked up The Score by Elle Kennedy. This is the third book in the Off-Campus series. I love Dean and Allie. It's a reformed man whore and also like a secret friends with benefits relationship that to me never gets old. I love the way that Dean, person who never wanted to commit to anybody in his life, starts making these little concessions for Allie. Like he doesn't even know that he is singling her out and doing kind of boyfriend things with her. I love this hockey series. This college hockey series is one of my favorite new adult romances. I think that it's just so strong. I don't think that it's overly dramatic like some college age romances tend to be, and I just really enjoy their relationship so much. So I've talked about this book multiple times. I really love the abs covers that Elle Kennedy did for these. It's like a mass market size. There was a trade size that was available a while back. Then she went to the covers with like the female characters on them, and she brought these back for like a limited time, and I snatched them up real quick because I wanted the abs covers. But anyway, I love Dean and Allie. They never really get old, and I'm glad that I reread them. I also reread The Devil is a Marquis by Lisa Braden, but this time it was for the podcast. Like I had a good excuse for rereading yet another book in these 2.5 weeks where my rereads definitely outnumbered my new book reads. But The Devil is a Marquis, I love the premise of this. It is an arranged marriage. I think it's a very, very unusual type of arranged marriage because the heroine is definitely being forced to marry the hero. Her father is a wealthy American man who wants his daughter to marry into the aristocracy. She hasn't really had any luck during the season because she's so tall and she's red-haired and freckled. She's very clumsy, but her dad comes to London and arranges a marriage to this reprobate. Benedict Chatham, the Marquis of Rutherford, he is a drunk. His father had so much debt, and that's why he agrees to this marriage contract with Lancaster to marry his daughter. It's because he truly has nothing left. He sold off all of the estates that are not entailed, and he has been selling his body to basically survive for like the past couple of months since he's inherited the title and everything. But I feel like the arranged marriage is so interesting because it seems like Charlotte's father doesn't care about her. Like he is forcing her to marry this horrible sounding man. Like on paper he sounds horrible. Who would want to foist their daughter on this drunk who sleeps around with women for money? But her father stipulates in the contract that they have to be married for a year. They cannot live apart. He cannot drink alcohol, and he has to be faithful to her. So I love that the father includes this in the marriage contract. He's being extremely high-handed with the whole situation, but it's not like he's uncaring about his daughter. He definitely doesn't just be like, oh, I don't care who you marry. Like he makes it so. He tries to protect his daughter as much as he can. And he also tells Benedict that he sees so much potential in him, and it disgusts him how much that potential is being wasted in somebody like Benedict. Like he could use his brains, but instead he's wasting his life away on alcohol. So I really love it because Charlotte's the stronger character, especially in the beginning. She is a go-getter. She always sees a silver lining, and she's not afraid of hard work. And that's why I think that they are the perfect match, because Charlotte just awakened something in Benedict, and he really needed this kick in the ass. And I love the stipulations where he can't sleep with anybody else. It's forced proximity. They have to live with each other, and he's detoxing from alcohol. So it's like very horrible for him in the beginning. So yeah, I love this reread. 5 stars. Lisa Braden, I love her. Next I read It Ain't Me, Babe by Tilly Cole. This is the first book that I've ever read by Tilly Cole, and I got this version from Mystic Box a couple months ago. Tilly Cole was the featured author. I'm very wary about motorcycle romances. I just don't normally gravitate to them. The language that they use, the biker speak with like, you know, bitch and slut, and the way that they treat women, I just don't love, because it's definitely a choice the way that they treat the women because of, you know, their culture. But this book starts off in such a way that I was completely hooked. The hero's name is River, and when he's young, like about 10 years old, he's riding along with his father as they're going like dump the bodies of like their rivals in the forest, and his father told him to stay put by the motorcycles, but he does not listen, and he goes into the forest and he gets kind of lost. Well, he stumbles upon this fence, and he sees this girl crying, and she's wearing such weird clothing. It's like she's covered from like neck to feet, and this weird white gown, and her hair is like all up, and like it's just very weird. And when he calls out to her, he has a stammer, and he can only talk to a few people, like his father and his best friend Kai, and I think maybe Kai's dad as well. But he hates talking in front of people because it's so hard for him to get the words out. But he does find that he can talk a little bit easier with this girl. He sees her eyes, he calls them like wolf eyes. They're so blue, and she has such black hair. My battery's about to die, just give me 1 second. So where was I? He actually has his first kiss with her, and like she is so very shocked. Like she has obviously lived a very sheltered life, and she's living it behind this fence, and he's just like, what the hell is this place? Like, this is so weird. They both hear his father like calling for him, and she gets spooked and she runs away. He never gets her name. I think she just says like, I am sin, we are all sin, or whatever. He never hears from her again. 15 years pass, and we find out that the heroine Salome, she has been brought up in this cult. She has been sexually assaulted multiple times since she was a very young girl. I think it was 8 years old when it started, and we get all this background like in bits and pieces and stuff, but finally enough was enough. There was something that tipped her over the edge and made her want to try to escape. She's been brought up to believe that the outside world is so sinful, and that she's going to be tempted and basically go to hell if she ever tried to leave the place. But she is just, there's something that happened that made her run anyway, and she gets underneath the fence. One of the guard dogs like attaches to her leg right before she gets through, but she does end up by escaping. She hitchhikes with this woman and kind of passes out in her truck. Doesn't want to go any further, and just like, just let me out here. I can probably, you know, find a place to just hole up and tie up my leg and hopefully find help somewhere else. Well, she just so happens to get dumped at this motorcycle club, and she passes out behind like a dumpster outside, and Styx finds her. So River is Styx. Styx is his road name, and at first he doesn't really recognize her, like recognize that this could be the same girl, but eventually he clues in like, can this be the same girl? She's wearing like kind of similar clothing, and she has really dark hair and blue eyes. Like, this could be the same girl. He wants to know about her, and she's so like fearful and has been brainwashed her whole life. And to go from a very God-fearing community that says if you disobey, you're going to die and go to hell and stuff like that, to going to a motorcycle club where there's, you know, sex, drugs, and alcohol just everywhere. People are crass and coarse. It's just like crazy. But I really respected the heroine Salome, and she prefers to be called May because that's what she and her sisters, they were all given names of women in the Bible. Her sister's name was Jezebel, but they called her Belle. There's Delilah, and oh my god, I forgot the last one's name. Doesn't really matter for the purpose of this book. But I really respected the way that May was scared, but she was also willing to learn, because she knew that something was wrong with the way that she grew up. She knew that the way that they were being treated, she is definitely somebody who is doubting the teachings that she has been, you know, force-fed her whole entire life. She is doubting that. And that's why I really enjoyed this book. I did end up by really enjoying It Ain't Me, Babe. And it was a very strong romance. Now, it is very dark, and I will say that the trauma is very heavily depicted. Like, Tilly Cole is very descriptive, very graphic in all of the trauma scenes. All of the sexual assault scenes that happen in this book, they happen on page. In a way, it makes you understand how horrific these things are. But when I picked up the second book, so I did go straight on to the second book, and I gave that one 4.5 stars. But I picked up Heart Recaptured, and I do feel like there's a complete difference in tone because the characters are so different for Hearts Recaptured. Kind of a little bit of a spoiler, but the heroine for this book is Delilah. And Lila, who is another one of the cursed women. So the commune that they were a part of, this cult, they segregated the most beautiful women and called them the cursed, and basically said it was their fault for tempting men, and they had the devil in them. And the only way to exorcise this devil was for the elders to sleep with them and fuck it out of them. It is horrific. It is horrible. It is very incredible. It's so disturbing. It's like so much And that's where I feel like it differed so much. Like Hearts Recaptured differed so much for me from It Ain't Me, Babe, because Delilah really believes these teachings. Like she believes, she's kind of mad at being rescued. She believes that the only way that her soul will be saved is if she returns to that type of abuse. And she is so brainwashed. And Tilly Cole does have an author's note at the beginning of both of the books saying, you know, her background, her study of different religions, and also interviewing people who were a part of a cult. She does make it very clear that some people who are a part of religious communes like this don't regret their lifestyle, but some that she's interviewed and what she's basing this book off of are the people who have harrowing experiences that have traumatized them. Holy hell. Yeah, Delilah. It's very hard being in her head when she is still she's such a slave to the teachings still after being rescued, and after May is trying to tell her, you know, we've been lied to and there's a word for what happened to us and it was rape. You know, the elders, they should never have touched us. We were children. We were unwilling. Like, absolutely not. Like, this is wrong and you have to see that as wrong. We're trying to help you. We're trying to give you a life. We're trying to give you freedom. And her hero, Kai, is a big man whore. And part of what's so sad about this relationship is that Kai is so taken in with the beauty of Delilah, because she is gorgeous, just his type, long blonde hair, stacked, and just has the most beautiful face. And she thinks that beauty is a curse. So he's saying how much he thinks she's gorgeous, and he just like, I'm tempting him. I have the devil in me, and it's not his fault. It's my fault. It's my fault that I am basically hypnotizing him into wanting to be with me because of my beauty. And it is such an exhausting book to read about these two. And I feel personally like the trauma that happens in It Ain't Me, Babe, I think it served a purpose, but Tilly Cole goes above and beyond to revisit trauma on her characters, and I kind of categorize that as trauma porn. Like, is it necessary to be that descriptive with these rape scenes, brutal rape scenes, some in flashbacks, some in present day, and it was too much for me. I was like, I feel like it wasn't necessary. Like, believe me, I get how horrifying their childhood was and, you know, the stuff that they're experiencing now. I don't need to be reminded of it again and again and again. And I just felt like it was just too much. Like, I prefer a subtler approach when it comes to stuff like this, because it's heavy in a different way. This is a dark in a different way than other dark romances that I like to read. So I didn't enjoy this one as much. It was really hard, not only because of the description of all those scenes, but also just because of the relationship and the way, the mindset that Delilah had about being cursed throughout almost the entire book. So it was a lot. So I gave this one 3.5 stars, and I was like, okay, I need a break. Like, I want to read the rest of the series. Absolutely. Jen does say that certain couples are revisited, and I think that Delilah and Kai are definitely one that need to be revisited, because she didn't have as much of an arc personally for me. She has lots of growth potential that I believe could happen in another book if she is the one that gets a second book. So anyway, I am going to continue with the series. I just think that I will probably need breaks in between them because it's just a lot, and I'm assuming that the next book is going to have the same amount of abuse be depicted on page, and so I just have to mentally prepare myself for that and possibly skim some of it, because it's just, I get it. I can't keep reading it. Okay, now funnily enough, after all this darkness, I was like, I need something light. I need something like rom-com-y, and I put My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey on my June TBR. I was like, this will be perfect. I pick it up. There's nothing wrong with this book, and I'm not DNFing it. But for some reason, I was like, but this isn't the book that I feel like I want to read right now. I'm definitely going to read it during the month of June, but not right now. And Crystal was saying in her June TBR that she wanted to read Knotted by Pam Godwin, and I was just like, oh, cowboy romance. That sounds fun. I don't know why I forgot that this was Pam Godwin writing these books. Pam Godwin, if you have not read her books, she writes some dark romance too, but it's dark in a different way than Tilly Cole. It is not the same at all. Anyway, Knotted starts off with a very traumatic scene. And I was just like, it's kind of ironic that I went from the Hades Hangman series feeling weighed down, wanting something lighter. I tried something lighter, and I was like, but that's still not what I'm in the mood for at the moment. So let's pick up Knotted, and it ends up by being a dark book. But it worked. It worked. It's dark in a different way. That's all I can say. There is definitely on-page abuse being depicted. There is a sexual assault scene in the very first chapter, and it is horrific. But I also feel like Pam Godwin, she's just amazing. I just think that she's such a fantastic writer. And I love the way that she writes relationships that are maybe like born of darkness, or they go through something extremely dark together and have to pull each other out of that. It's just fantastic what she does with that. So anyway, the hero and the heroine, they are childhood sweethearts. They grew up together. Their fathers have this ranch in Oklahoma together. It was originally their mothers who actually were in business together, and their fathers met just because they married, the mothers. Both the mothers have since passed on, and Jake and his twin Jarrett are really good friends with Connor and her older brother. Oh God, what is his name? Is it Lorne? I think his name's Lorne. Yeah, it's Lorne. Okay, anyway, so they're all really good friends. Lorne is the oldest one out of the bunch. He just turned 18 in chapter 1. He's recently turned 18. Jake and Jarrett are currently 16, but in a couple weeks they will be 17. And Connor is 16 currently. She just turned 16. Well, Jake and Connor have been an item forever. They live in the same house too, which makes this a little bit, like you live in the same house as your boyfriend and girlfriend. Well, they haven't gone all the way yet, but this is the night. And they're all on horses, and they're all going out on a night ride, and Jake and Connor settle by this ravine, and he's ready to finally be with Connor, and Connor's finally ready to be with Jake. And Jake has had this fascination with some bondage kink that he's never, he's watched, porn, and he's like, that kind of interests me. I think I want to do that with Connor. He ends up by tying her to a tree. But this is where it turns tragic, because there are these men that appear. They already have Jarrett and Lorne tied up and gagged, and they knock out Jake and they brutally assault Connor while she is tied up to a tree. So there's heavy guilt that Jake is carrying for the fact that he's the one that tied her up. Connor says, even if I wasn't tied up, I would never have left you guys. Like, I would never have left you guys. I know you feel the guilt because I wasn't able to escape, but also I wouldn't have escaped anyway. I couldn't leave my brother and my boyfriend and my best friend. Like, I could not have left you guys. Lorne does get out of his bindings, ends up by killing one guy and goes after the other one. One of the guys survives. Lorne accidentally kills an innocent bystander, and Lorne goes to jail for killing the innocent person. Connor's dad decides, I'm going to sell my stake in this business, in the land and all that, to Jarrett and Jake's dad, and we're gonna move to Chicago. So he takes Connor away and moves him to Chicago. Gives up on his son Lorne, doesn't even think like this is wrong, that he should be in jail for this. Like, he doesn't try to fight for his son. So the whole book turns into a second chance romance, because Connor and Jake don't talk to each other again for 2 years until she's 18. And there's more going on there's lots of stuff going on to the story. And I think that's what's so great about Pam Godwin, because she makes this incredibly compelling setup in the beginning, does not answer all of your questions. She purposely throws out these little threads that you need to follow because you want to know more. It doesn't make sense, and something more is going on and you want to know that. And that's why this book was so great. I loved it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. There was a moment, and it was explained why Jake did the thing that he did, but I still was struggling with his approach and his method. Like, I understand his motivations, but like, wow, you really hurt her. There was a scene that's why I'm taking off the 0.5 stars, because I didn't love it. I felt like there could have been a different approach, even though I don't know what that would be. I don't know. It was just definitely something that stood out of my mind, that I was like, oh God, can I forgive you for this type of thing? And I did. So yeah, those are all the books that I read for the past couple of weeks. I'm currently reading the second book in this Trails of Sin series. It's Jarrett's book. It's set up at the end of Knotted, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm about halfway through. I'll probably finish today, and then I'll wrap up the series with Lauren's book. I don't know who his heroine's going to be, because he's currently in jail. So I don't know who he's going to be set up with. I'm very excited about it. I'm really loving Jarrett's book as well, because the heroine has a very obscure background, and I have no idea what to expect from that, honestly. And I feel like that's just something that Pam Godwin excels at when it comes to my ability to predict character motivations, guess what has been hidden by the characters. I don't know. It's just really great. I love Pam Godwin. She's amazing. All right, guys, that is it. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye, guys.